make people meshuga.
Yeah, but it's just when you were saying it yesterday, I was thinking today we apply silver for the same reasons.
I always heard about copper. People they say copper heals.
Bracelets, you see copper on bracelets, but silver has been lately, so I mean, for burns it was always, but lately they're weaving it into fabrics for sweat and smell, etc., etc.
Right. Samach Vav. Samach Vav always sounds for us like intimidating.
Yeah, brings back memories of Nachman.
My God. I'm going to say it's a plant, the matter plant. If I don't pronounce it good, Danny's going to push it, come out of the computer and strangle me.
Where is it?
Matter. Matter is, that's the way I read it, Madder. Does it sound familiar to you? It's a plant called...
No, but where is it? Samach Vav?
Yeah, we're on to Samach Vav. That's Samach Vav on the base already.
Morgen.
Morgen.
Where did we stop?
We stopped on, no. Samach Vav, we're middle of the Mishnah.
Oh, right.
Second line in the Mishnah. All right, Chevra, vamos, Freilach. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos Daf Samach Vav. We are continuing the Mishnah. First case of the Mishnah was speaking about one who has a handicap that part of their leg is missing. They would wear in the times of Chazal some sort of primitive, what we would call prosthetic, a kav. The kav, this type of fake wooden foot, was made out of wood. Question is whether we consider that entire foot a shoe. Why would it not be a shoe? Because it's made out of wood. If it's a shoe, which is the way our Girse is Shitas Rav Meir, then there's no problem wearing it in the Rishus Harabim, because as we have been learning, when you garb yourself, wearing garments is not called a burden. However, the Tana Rabbi Yossi doesn't consider a wooden foot a shoe. Neither does he consider it a tachshit, as we spoke out details and we'll review it today. So actually, according to Rabbi Yossi, it's usher for a person to go out b'reshus harabim with this wooden foot. This is the first case of the Mishnah, and we will be having two other cases, two other scenarios related to such a sort of handicap, whether there's an actual part of the leg that's missing. We're going to learn about people whose legs are not functioning, and the various devices that one needed to go out with to be able to propel oneself in the times of Chazal, whether they are or not permitted mitzad Hilchos Shabbos. And as we already began yesterday, the Mishnah linked these articles also with Dinei, Tuma, and Tara. Now we're going to have a machlokes in the version of the first machlokes in the Mishnah. There were those who had, their girsa was mamash the opposite, that Rabbi Yossi was the makel. Rabbi Yossi was the one that held that a wooden leg is considered a shoe, and therefore you are allowed to go out with it. Rav Meir was the one that held, nah, it's a shoe, nor is it a tachshit. And then we're going to conclude which girsa is correct. We will also learn beautiful dinim of Hilchas Tumah V'Tara, particularly when it comes to Tumas Midras. Tumas Midras is this unique type of Tumah. As we mentioned many times, normally when the item that is Tameh, that is going to be the conveyor of Tumah, the recipient of it, the one that acquires Tumah on a level lower. So if that which is being mitame is an Av, that which has contact with will become Tameh as on the level of a Rishon. If the mitame is a Rishon, that which will acquire Tumah normally will become a Tameh on the level of a Sheni. It goes down one notch. Tumas Midras is the exception. So for example, if a Zav sits on something that was meant to be sat upon, that item becomes just as Tameh as the Zav, and that's called Tumas Midras. Now what we will be learning is what happens if an article was primarily not made to be sat upon or to be laid upon, but there is a secondary function that some use it, to lay on or to lean on. Is that secondary function enough to make it susceptible to Tumas Midras or not? We'll speak out more details when we learn the Gemara. That is really going to be a big machlokes between Abaya and Rava. We're going to start learning a new Mishnah, which adds other items that one may go out with. We're going to be speaking about madder, nuts. Madder is a plant, and in the times of Chazal, they would make some sort of necklace out of this plant, and they would make them into nuts, and that necklace was worn as some sort of remedy. And we're going to learn whether one is allowed or not allowed to go out with such a remedy on Shabbos, whether that's called carrying, whether it's not called carrying, and that's going to lead us into a whole series of healing, therapeutical practices that they had in the times of Chazal. We're going to be learning also about incantations, saying alachash. We're going to be having some phenomenal, what we will call talismanic remedies, almost magical remedies. I'll repeat it when we learn the Gemara, but it's important to say right away that there is a cherem hakadmonim. That's brought down in the Noise Kelim and the Shulchan Aruch, for us not to practice any of the remedies that we find in the Gemara, for a few reasons. First of all, we don't fully understand them. Maybe we won't get the pshat. We won't get the item correct. We won't get the quantity correct. We won't get the lachash correct. Number two, even if we get them correct, for various reasons, they might not function out. L'mashal, there's a concept in halacha called nishtano hativim. There's also other reasons why they may not work. And if a person is going to put into practice these remedies and it will not work, such a person can start laughing at Chazal or not taking what the sages say seriously, as we all have to, because all of this is part of Toras Emes. So therefore, we'll be learning them because of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. But just to speak out that there's a cherem, not to practice it, but we're gonna learn about phenomenal remedies. There's a remedy for a child who's homesick. How do you deal with that? We're gonna actually also learn that any remedy on Shabbos that has to do with the physical manipulation of the body, today that would go into the category of a chiropractor, right? We're gonna learn about such practices. That is not included in the Isur Midrabanan of Shchika Samamanim, because you're not ingesting anything. You're just getting your body manipulated. True that there is a certain issue of Uvda D'Chayil, as we'll speak out, but we could be lenient when a person is in Sar to say that trumps Uvda D'Chayil, but normally being in pain does not trump Shchikas Samamanim. Ubemela, remedies that have to do with body manipulation are more permissible than taking other sort of remedies. And we're going to be learning also the source of kaparis, but it's going to be mamash from the left field and a lot more. Let us start on Daf Samach Vav Amud Aleph. We are up to the second line in the Mishnah. Again, Chazering, the Mishnah began speaking about an amputee who wore a prosthetic. Unlike our prosthetics that are very functional, in the times of Chazal, the prosthetic wasn't even strong enough for you to lean on it properly. Forget about the fact that it didn't help you walk. It was primarily worn for cosmetic purposes. In other words, it was to hide the fact that the person is an amputee. Now, the leg is made out of wood. Our gears in the Mishnah is that the Tanach of Meir holds a wooden leg is a shoe. Ubemela, you can wear it because it's a shoe. Rabbi Yossi disagrees with that. Rabbi Yossi holds a shoe, it's not. So Elamah, you want to call it a tachshit, right? So that's the chiddush of Rabbi Yossi. It's also not a tachshit. In other words, it's considered a burden. And as we spoke out, and to repeat it right now, today's prosthetics, and we'll have this in the Sugya soon, in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, and in the Gemara, if they help you walk and you cannot walk without it, they become your accessory, and you are allowed to go out with it with the Rishus HaRabim. This type of kav, kuvav, kav shaloid means your measure, kav also means your stick, that this type of wooden leg was not helpful in making you walk. Actually, you carried the leg. The leg was not servicing you. You were servicing the leg. Ubemela, it's not a tachshit. It's not a shoe. You may not walk out with it. And then the Mishnah added, linked it to Dinei Tumah V'Tara, that what? That if it has a base kibble, kisisin, if there is a place on the top of this wooden leg in which you can put rags, which would make the stump of the leg not have to touch directly the wood. Therefore, we consider this it's a wood that has a clay kibble, that has a receptacle, therefore it's susceptible to becoming tamei, let's say tumas meis. However, if it doesn't even have such a hole, such a receptacle in which you can put rags, even though you put the stump of the leg in there, that means it's not mamish flat, but again, the stump of the leg doesn't really rest on it. It doesn't really help you with the weight. It's just for cosmetics. Then we view this leg as a pshute kliyates, and the rule is that any flat wooden utensil is not susceptible to tuma. And the Mishnah and the Reish is speaking only about tumas meis. We will address tumas midras later on in the Gemara. A lot more details, but we'll develop it as we go along. Let's continue in the Mishnah. The Mishnah now is going to speak about two other handicaps related to either a piece of the body being missing or for the body completely not to be functioning anymore. So case number 2 in the Mishnah is Samoichai Shalai. Samoichai Shalai is speaking about a person that is nebach, a double amputee. This double amputee, he was only able to propel himself forward by him basically getting on his knees or on his shins. He would move himself forward with his hands. But in order to protect his knees and his shins from getting hurt, they would have some sort of leather support. Okay. Now, this leather support, again, it doesn't help you walk, but it helped you. It was made for you to rest on. So when you're not moving, for your shins, for your knees, not to be on the ground, so they are in this leather support. So says the Mishnah, being that unlike the wooden leg, unlike the first case in the Mishnah, the leg was not made for you to lean on, zikr not primarily. So therefore, as we mentioned, it's not susceptible to becoming tummy unless there's a place for rags. So then it's a holder of rags. But midras, being that they were made for you to put your weight on it, therefore, if this double amputee lamashal is azov, since he's leaning on or he's resting on something that was made to be sat upon or laid upon or rested upon, so it does become tummy v'tumas midras. And being that this double amputee needs these leather supports for him to be able to move, and they are in assistance of a lot more than the kav, therefore he is allowed to go out with it b'Shabbos, even though there's no eruv. Very much like today, if a person is unable to go out without crutches, if a person is unable to walk without a cane, then the din is he's allowed to use it because it becomes part of him. It becomes like a third leg. And a third case, these samoichais were made out of leather, not like the kav that was made out of wood. Ubamela, we are throwing in another din in the Mishnah, and that is v'nichnasin b'hen ba'azara. Even though, like Rashi brings down, we learned in brachas that lo yikanes adam laharabayis bimin aloi. Right, we may not wear shoes, leather shoes, and harabayis. Here, being that it's not, you don't put them on your foot. You put them on your shins. You put them on your knees. Interesting. So therefore, they don't have a din of a shoe. This person doesn't even have feet. It's missing. If it doesn't have a din of a shoe, even though this person basically leans on it, he rests on it, it's not a shoe. So you are allowed to go into the Azara, and you're not violating the Isur of going into the Harabayas and to the Azara with leather shoes. It's not a shoe. The third case the Mishnah is speaking about, here we're speaking about a person who's not an amputee. There's nothing missing on the body, but the person's lower legs and feet, they atrophied. And under the Veter, they're not functioning. Oh, so how did they work? How did they move themselves around then? So they had both some sort of chair, not the wheelchair of today, but it was a much simpler chair that was somehow strapped onto their body. It was behind, it was on the back. Whenever they needed, they would sit on that chair. And they also would wear samoichais. They would also wear these leather supports for their feet. And they would also propel themselves somehow. They would propel themselves using their hands. So says the Mishnah that over here, Tanei and Midrash, we're speaking about the samoichais. Samoichais were made that when you are resting, you should be able to rest your shins, your knees on these supports. So again, since it was made for you to put your weight on it, so then it's susceptible to Tumas Midas. The Ein Yoitzim Behem B'Shabbos, we're not speaking about the chair. The chair that the Shainim say, the Kisei, you are allowed to go out with. The Samoichais for this person was not allowed because since his feet are there, Elamad, they're the atrophy, they're not working well. The type of samoichas they made for this handicap was something that would easily fall off. So here we're entering a whole nother issue, that anything that you wear that might fall off, and if it falls off, you might carry it, then there's a chashash you might carry. So that's the Ein Yoitzim B'Shabbos. Again, the chair, yes, because the chair was needed for the movement. The samoichas was more that while you're moving, your feet should not get hurt. And again, dafka on this person, they would not be bound so strongly. And the ein nechnasim behem ba'azara, because they are considered shoes, because this person's physical feet are there. The samoichas didn't only go on the knees and on the shins. The samoichas went all the way under the foot, even though the person cannot walk. But leather that goes under your foot is called shoes. If it's shoes, then you can't enter the azara. Okay. And now the Mishnah, this is a fourth din, which is not negeya b'chlal to an amputee. Loi kitmin. We'll see in the Gemara and Samach Vav Amud Beis 3 opinions what this means. Loi kitmin is tohirim. We'll quote the third one. The third one is that it's a mask. It's a mask that Rashi writes in Amud Beis that a clown would wear to frighten children. Now, how fun is that? So this loi kitmin is tahir, meaning it's not considered an ornament. That means it's not considered a keli. It's not susceptible to becoming tamei. And on the other hand, it's never considered a beged. It's not considered a tachshit. Stama mishragas. And therefore, ve'ein yoitzin bohem. Therefore, one may not go out with such a mask. Now, put a mask on Shabbos wherever there's no eruv. Okay. So now the Gemara is going to refer to the first case of the Mishnah. Amputee in one leg. He's wearing a wooden leg. Our girsa is, Rav Meir says that he could go out. Hakiteya yoitzei. And Rabbi Yossi says, Oyser. Okay. Amalei Rav Nachman. Hey Chatanan. What is the girsa in our Mishnah? There's two options. Either the girsa, like Rashi writes, is Hakiteya Yoitzei, which is our version. Rav Meir is the Kal. Rabbi Yossi is the Machmir. Or the Mishnah begins with the words Ein Hakiteya Yoitzei. Divrei Rav Meir. And Rabbi Yossi Matir. Okay, who said what? What's the version? Asks Rav to Rav Nachman. So Amalei Rav Nachman tells Rav, I don't know. Okay, next question. Hilchas Amai. Okay, regardless which Tana said what is the halacha? Again, Amalei lo yodano. And for sure, one is connected to the other. We will learn these klalim in many other places, these rules that even though Rav Meir was the wisest, and we were never fully able to grasp the logic behind Rav Meir, Adarabba, that's why we couldn't paskin like him, because we couldn't fully understand him. The rule is normally Rabbi Yossi, we paskin like Rabbi Yossi because it's called Rabbi Yossi Nimukai Imai. He gave a reason that everyone had to agree with his reason. So Mustama, one is connected to the other. Since we didn't know who said what, if we would know the version, then we would know like our girsa is, we paskin like Rabbi Yossi. You can see the aleph on the first line in the Amid from the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah. No, that was. But since we don't know who said what, Rav Nachman doesn't know. He doesn't know what to pass on. And if
Is there
not,
such
however,
a
we learn.
Rabbi? Is there such a thing that the Mishnah says clearly, and there's still a suffix? I mean,
in other words, Shlomo, they had a different girsa in the Mishnah, as we'll see. You have such a thing. It's very rare, and that's why the Gemara is going to spend time and effort to clarify. We should know what the Mishnah says. So Itma, we learned Amar Shmuel ein hakiteya. Shmuel's girsa, at least initially, was the opposite of what we have, right? If you would look on Daf Samach Hemad Beis, the Mishnah by Shmuel began not hakiteya. Ein hakiteya yoytz v'kav shel divrei Rav Meir. Rabbi Yossi was lenient. And V'chein, Rav Huna also had in his Mishnayos the girsa ein hakiteya. And Amar Rabbi Yosef, I think I had a doubt. Amar Shmuel ein hakiteya, and comes along Rav Huna ein hakiteya. Oibazoi anonami nitni. I'm going to start chazering my Mishnah by heart by beginning this Mishnah with ein hakiteya yoytz v'kav sheloi divrei Rav Meir, which will force us to say that Rabbi Yossi matir. Maskevla Rava. Barshira to Rabbi Yosef, did you not hear that Rav Chanan bar Rava learned into Chia Barav in front of Rav, in the presence of Rav? Not only are we sharing a teaching that was said from whom to whom, in front of whom, on Nacha detail, the location, which is unusual. It happens, but it's not that common. Bikitoina de Beirav, in the small chamber of Rav's yeshiva. It's mamish amazing. Parenthetically, by us, we call the Alter Rebbe the Rav. And the Alter Rebbe also had 3 chadarim, as we know. And we say by the Alter Rebbe that Rav Tanuhu. So here you say this mistama, the small chamber, by the Alter Rebbe, the chadarim were for extraordinary talmidim. So it was learned in front of Rav in the special, exclusive, let's say, yeshiva, and he taught ein hakitea yoytze b'kav shalei divrei Rav Meir v'Rabbi Yossi matir, the way Shmuel had it, the way Rav Huna had it, not the way we have it. But that was said in front of Rav. Rav heard it. Umach v'lei Rav epach. Rav signaled with his hands. You got to flip it around. But Rav said that. No one is going to challenge Rav. And Amar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. To remember, how will we remember who said what? Now that we have this the machlokes in Girsa, he gives a siman. The simanech samach. It's kavaldik. Rabbi Yossi has a samach in it. Oyser in our invited a samach in it. And by both cases, the samach is the third letter in the word. So samach is the shidduch, not Rabbi Yossi mat, Rabbi Yossi Oyser. And so first of all, Rav. That's it. Once we go from there, everything changed. Now the Gemara says you should know indeed va'af Shmuel hadarbe. And because of that event, eventually Shmuel changed his opinion. How do I know that? Because it says the Trabi learned the Mishnah in Yavamis. I'm jumping to Hilchas Chalitza. Chalitza always has to be done on the right. That Chalza b'sandal she'ena shaloi. If the shoe is on the foot, the right foot of the husband, and she removes it. What happens if it was not his? It was on his foot, she removed it, but it didn't belong to him. Or he was not wearing a sandal out of leather, which is, again, shoe. Sandals, halachically means leather shoes, leather sandals. What happens if it was b'sandal shalates, which is really the neshama of the machlokes in our Mishnah, like we have been explaining, why will you be allowed or not be allowed to go out on Shabbos? The question is whether we view wood as a shoe, because if it's a shoe, then you can wear a shoe. Or b'sandal shalates, or shall smoil biyamin, it was a left shoe, but at least it was on the right foot, which is the ikir. It was on the right foot. Therefore, it was removed from the right foot. So the Mishnah says, chalitza ksheir. Now, what are we focusing on? The fact that the sandal can be shalates. And on that, v'amenin and man tana, we wanted to know who authored that Mishnah. Who says that even if your shoe or sandal is made out of wood, halachically it's still a shoe, and Amar Shmuel it's Rav Meir. And he quotes our Mishnah, Gavaldik, the Tanach Kitea Yotze V'Kav Shel Rav Meir and Rabbi Yossi Yosef. And that's taka the machlokes, whether we consider wood a shoe or not. The fact that Shmuel linked the Yavamis Mishnah to the Mishnah over here, clear. Shmuel eventually had the girsa the way we have it. The way
we have 2 different opinions of Shmuel in the Mishnah.
Shmuel changed his mind. Shmuel Haderbei, the Gemara says. And Ba'af Rav Huna Haderbei. Rav Huna also later changed his mind. How do we know that Rav Huna changed his mind? Because the Tanya we learned, Sandal Shal Sayadin, A sayod means plaster, right? Sayod. So there were people that either they fabricated plaster or they were plaster salesmen, and they would travel with plaster. And like Rashi says, plaster was so strong that if it were to fall on their shoes, which happened, it would burn through it, it would ruin it. So they would wear something that would protect their shoes. What was that? So Rashi says it was some sort of wood, we'll call it a galoshin, in other words, for the rain. Or today what the doctors wear, Daniel, yeah, what do you guys put on when you go into surgery? That shmata you put over.
Like the Crocs? No.
Booties.
The shmata that a doctor puts over a shoe, just to make it clear, is not called a keli because it's disposable. But here they had something of greater permanency. Let's go with, Tosfos says it's made out of straw. Rashi says eights, it's also straw. They had a cheap, reusable shoe that covered their shoe. So the Mishnah, sandal shal sayadin, even though it's a shmata shoe, since they wear it, so Tomei Midras. Again, the key of Midras is it's something that was made to bear your weight. It's a shoe. It's made for you to put your feet in. And the Isha Chaletzas boy. And a woman, if a man wore such a wooden or straw shmata shoe, it's good enough for a chalitza. And the yotzim by b'Shabbos. It's all consistent. It's all consistent. Wood is considered a shoe. These are the words of Rabbi Akiva. However, but the other Chachamim did not agree with him. And like the Gemara, we learned in another Braisa that the other Chachamim were hoidulai, and on that answered Rav Huna, man hoidulai, Rav Meir. Clearly again, you see that Rav Huna eventually retracted his original. He now accepts our girsa, all based on Rav. Again, our Mishnah holds that Rav Meir says, it's all coming from the same point, that wood is considered a shoe. And Oman loy hoidulai, all this Rav Huna said is Rabbi Yosi. All this is a raya that Rav Huna, like Shmuel, they eventually came around and they have our girsa. Now the Gemara continues, whether it's Amar Rabbi Yosef or whether it's Rabbi Yosef Amar, that there's another Tana that does not agree with Rav Meir. That man loy hoidulai, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. The Tanach, as we learned in the Mishnah. Now, this is a Mishnah in Kalim, and we will read it. I have on my left side the correct version from the Mesoides Hashas. So I'm reading it from the side. Machatzeles hakash, a straw mat. Straw mat was made to lay upon. They used to lay on it. Or ushif foiferes hakash, a straw tube, means it's some sort of straw basket. Let's go back inside our Gemara. Shalkanim. Okay, kanim is straw, or it's made out of reeds in a wood. Rabbi Akiva says it's mitamei, and Rabbi Yochanan holds that it's mitayr. In other words, the question is it susceptible to becoming tamei or not? Now, obviously, Rabbi Yochanan holds that it's tahar because he holds that it's garnished. So therefore, he is also the one that disagrees with Rabbi Meir. Okay, Amar Mar, let's quote this Mishnah that Rabbi Akiva holds, but that was Rabbi Akiva, that sandal shall sayadin Tomei Midras. It's not made to walk upon, it's a shmata. You wear it over your shoes. You're walking in your shoes. Yeah, it goes over your shoes. It's put to protect your shoes from the sayad. But how can we say that it's made to bear your weight? So Amar Avachi Bar Ula, no, yeah, the sayad walked with it. It was made for protection. It was a shmata, but he would walk with it. Sheken hasayad mitayel b'yachem agia lebeisai. That justifies it becoming susceptible to Tumas Midras, a lot more in Tumas Midras right now in the Gemara. Okay, so the Gemara is going to we're still on the first case in the Mishnah. We're speaking about this wooden leg for the single amputee. The Mishnah says, Im yeshle beiskibul ksisin, if there is a place in which you can put rags in it, then it's tamei. The Mishnah in the Reisha is not speaking about Tumas Midras. The Mishnah is speaking about Tumas Meis. No, Pshutei Kliyes is not Makabel Tuma. The fact that your stump goes in there, it's still called Pshutei Kliyes, but if there's a hollow, you should put rags between the stump and this wooden foot up. Now it's a hollowed vessel. It holds rags. It's not Pshutei Kliyes. If a mace is under the same oil, let's say it's going to become tummy. Now, Amar Abaya, it's interesting, he points out. In the next two cases in the Mishnah, the Semoichais, the Kisa and the Semoichais, the Mishnah was speaking about Tumas Midras. In the Reisha, the top line of our Mishnah, The Mishnah didn't speak about tumas midras. The Mishnah only spoke about stam tuma, tumas meis. So he makes an inference. Good. Taka, even if there are rags in there, he says, tame tumas meis, because there's a clay kibble. But the ain tame midras, but it will never become tame betumas midras, because since the primary purpose of this wooden leg, like we said, is cosmetic, even though sometimes, I mean, if this guy never, he has a wooden leg, every now and then, if he's losing his weight, he's going to lean on it. But it wasn't made for that. It's not going to hold him up properly. We'll call this a secondary function. If the primary function is not to bear your weight, holds abaya, it's not going to become Tomei Midras, even though he's minded that every now and then a person might lean on it. Comes along Rav and he says, no, af Tomei Midras, minded the Metzias, those prosthetics were primarily made only for cosmetics, emes. But since there's a secondary function, sometimes the person leans on it. We do consider this an item that was meant to be leaned upon. Ubamela, it's included in the Chamur Dikadin of Tumas Midras. Each one is going to have a raya for themselves. Each one is going to have to take away the proof, which will be their refutation. I'll prove it to you. The Tanan Amishnan Beya, Agolo Shel Katan, a wagon of a child. Remember these little wagons, the red wagons? If a wagon of a child. What do they put in there? They put toys in there. But sometimes they put another child in there. So the Mishnah says, Tamei Midras. So what does it have a proof from there? Even though it's primarily meant to carry around toys, it's not made to carry human weight. Since occasionally a kid goes in there, so it's already says Tumas Midras. Here also, Abaya says, so first of all, that's a good raya. It's not only a raya to Rava, it's like a kasha and Abaya for effort. Abaya Omar, third to last line, Hassan Samachi Lavi. Forget about you putting a child in this wagon. The owner of the toy, whenever he or she, the child, is walking around with this wagon, they themselves lean on it. And that's ki'ilu, part of its primary function. Here, by the wooden leg, it's primarily not meant for you to lean on it. You often don't lean on it. Beruba, elama, a little bit. That's the whole vart of Abaya. If it's a little bit, it wasn't made for that. It's not included in Tumas Midras. So at least Abaya took away the kasha against him, but now Abaya needs a raya for him. How do I know my opinion? The Tanya, we learned in Abraisa, Makel Shalzakanim, a walking stick of the elderly. I heard a Gavaldik word from a yid here in Los Angeles that needs such a walking stick. So he tells me that we say in Ovalut Zion that Hashem, Elokei Avraham, Yitzchak, right? Yisrael Aviseinu, Shonos Yisraelim. He asks, why don't you say Hashem Elokei Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yakov? So he said a good word. He says that Makel, Soifa Tevis, look, Avraham is the mem, the Yitzchak is the kuf, and Yisrael. He says that when I'm walking with my walking stick, it's walking with me. Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov is walking with me. The Makel Shel Zakenim. So Makel Shel Zakenim, Tor Mikulam. Tor Mikulam is a big chiddush. Tor Mikulam means, Aleph, it's not susceptible to Tumas Meis, Shutei Klayetz. Okay, what about Tumas Midras? Since it's not primarily made to lean, it's made for you not to fall your balance. See, don't confuse something that makes you not lose your balance doesn't mean it was made for you to sit upon or to lay upon or to lean upon. It's not made for that. Yeah, occasionally when you lose your balance, you'll use it to chop your balance. But that's not the ikar. The ikar is just to keep your balance. So clearly the Braisa says, Torah Mikulam, that's a great raya to Abaya. If something is not made primarily to bear your weight, it's not included in Tumas Midras. So it's a raya to Abaya, it's a kasha against Rava. Hassan, over there, since Letarutze, Sugya, Avuda, it's made, it's never used to support your weight. Letarutze means to straighten your steps. That's a teretz means you're straightening it out. It's not made to support your weight. Some of these sticks in those days, it would crack if you're supporting your weight. It's made, again, to straighten your steps. That's what it's made for. Over here, this wooden leg was made that if occasionally you'll have to lean on it, it was stronger than the stick, this wooden leg. So it was used more often than the wooden stick to support your weight. And indeed, it's taka used for that. And that's why he holds that it is included in Tumas Midras, even though it's not included in Tumas Meis because of Pshutei Kleitz. Gewaltig. All right. The last case in the Mishnah was regarding the chair and the leg support. Right, we're speaking the third case in the Mishnah. The third handicap was not an amputee or a double amputee, but it's a person whose legs, right, atrophied, they're not functioning. So Tamei Midras means that both the chair and even though those samoichos were made for you to lean on or to sit on, the Ein Yotzim and Shabbos, we explained the kisei you could go out with. Those samoichos would fall off. For this type of handicap, the samoichos were made in a way that they can fall off, and there was a chashash you might carry it. And on the other hand, since the person physically had feet, and they went under the feet, they are called shoes, and if they're called shoes, then the einach nasim behem la'azon. And again, there's reasons why the Mishnah says azara. It means even on harabayis. Just to know, it goes together. It means you can't go into the azara, you can't even go to the harabayis. It says the Tanach kamei Rabbi Yochanan. No. Someone was learning at the Brais in front of Rabbi Yochanan, and he says, "Nechnasim la'azor." Amar lei. So Rav Nachman tells this Tana learner, this Amoira who knew all the Braisos by heart. I learned another Braisa where it says Isha chayletzes boy, that a woman can do chalitza in it, which is a proof that it's considered a shoe. And a shoe may never be brought into the Harabais or into the Azara. And that was so strong that Rabbi Yochanan tells this Tana teacher, amend, change it. For us, it's easy. For them, they knew everything by heart. To change what you have in your mind is a lot harder. Today, and indeed, that's the way it is. The final case in the Mishnah was like kitmin. Like kitmin is tahar. So asks the Gemara, "My like kitmin." I know in the Mishnah we spoke one. Here we'll learn all three. Amar Ababohu, Chamra, the Akpa. So you have some sort of clown that's walking around with a wooden donkey. The wooden donkey appears to be in between his legs. Really, the wooden donkey is being suspended from his shoulders. However that was done. It was done basically to make believe, to give the impression that he's riding upon something. So that's the part of the Mishnah. This Narash clown's article, even though it looks like he's riding on the donkey, he's not riding on the donkey. The donkey is laying on his shoulders. So therefore, it's not included in Dinei Tumas Midras. It also has no keli. Therefore, it's Pshutei Kleitz, and it's not Tamei B'Tumas Meis. Rava Bar Papa says that Loikitman is Keshirei. Keshirei, Rashi says, Matosfos says, we're speaking about some sort of stilts. Stilts, again, even though people walk on stilts, but the stilts was made to get you through a muddy area. So that was the chiddush of the Mishnah, that even though you're supporting yourself on the stilts, they're only made to take you through a muddy area. In other words, it's not about what is it used for, but the criterion for Tumas Midras is what purpose is there here. The purpose is not for you to lean on it. The purpose is just to make sure your shoes don't get dirty, to get you through a certain muddy area, which is a big chiddush. So since the purpose is not for you to put your weight on it, it's not included in Tumas Midras. And the first white line right before the Mishnah, Rava Barafuna, which is what we quoted when we learned the Mishnah, says that Lekitman is Piramei. So Rashi Piramei, the last of the wide lines on top of the Gemara and Rashi, Talmusa Haniksheres Alapar. So a mask that you hang on your face, Lahavis Habanim Ketanim, to scare young children. Now, Grace Yichas, you're scaring young children. But that was a thing that people wore. People have this craziness, and that is not considered the Keli. It's not considered a takshit, and therefore, if it's made out of wood, it's not susceptible to tumah, nor may you walk out with it on Shabbos. Okay, Chavra, as we mentioned in the intro, we're going to start a fascinating Gemara. We have every now and then in Shas this amount of, we have almost a whole Amud, and it's going to go into the Samach Zayin that's going to be dedicated to all sorts of, like we mentioned, therapies, remedies, incantations, and other techniques that were used that is part of Torah. And again, whatever we'll be learning right now is something that we should learn about, and Hashem should help that learning about it. That in itself should bring about our refuah, and we should all have a refuah shlema. But actually, to practice them, there's a chedem dafka not to do so, because if we get it wrong, or for whatever other reason it doesn't work, people, God forbid, should not suspect that this is not part of Torah, and it is, and Torah is Torah's emes, and it is. So let's learn it. So says the Mishnah, Habanim yoytzim b'ksharim. Sons can go out with knots. Now that's the whole knots. What knots are we talking about? The Gemara is going to clarify. It was some sort of medicinal, Talmudic medicinal knots, and they are allowed to go out with it. Second item, princes, wealthy children are allowed to go out bezugin with ornamental golden bells that were attached to their garments. Okay, this is not remedy related. This was a certain fancy decor. And really the Mishnah says it's not only princes can go out with this golden ornamental bells, really everyone is allowed to go out with it. Who had money to put golden bells on their garments, b'nei melachim. Now, there's a whole discussion in the Rishonim. Are we referring to bells with a clanker, with a clapper, and l'choira not? Because we already learned to sugya that midrabanan we may not be mashmiya koil. So we'll learn. We're speaking about zugim that made no noise. They were pashut purely ornamental. They were sewn onto the garments. This was a norm for wealthy people. It's considered part of your beged, and therefore you're not carrying anything at all. Okay. So now the Gemara says, let's go to focus on the first. Mike Shadim, what are these knots? Amar Ado Mari. Ado Mari says, in the name of Rav Nachman Bar Baruch, in the name of Rav Ashi Bar Avin, in the name of Rav Yehuda, Kishure Pua, knots of madder plant. So madder is a plant, and they would make out of that plant a necklace, and they would knot them up in a specific way, and they would hang it around their neck for curative purposes. And that's something that is allowed to be worn. Now here again, whenever we learn the sugya, ingesting medication is, something that we may not do. Even anointing ourselves with certain medications is something that we may not do for other reasons. This does not fall into the isur midrabanan of taking medication. It was a therapy. It had curative powers, and one is allowed to go out with it outside. No one is going to take it off. No one takes these things off. You want to be healed. Amar Abaye, Amr li aim. My mother, now really Abaye is the Chayasim. So whenever Abaye quotes his mother, he's referring to the woman that raised him, his nursemaid, that, this really works. But he had details. Tolosa, if you have 3 knots on this madder plant, therapeutical necklace, you made it 3-knotted, moikme, it has enough power to contain the illness. He's showing good. Doesn't get worse. Chamisha, if you have 5 knots on it, then it's even better. Then masu, then you heal the illness. Shiva, if you make it 7 knots, afilu likshafim ali. Even if someone had a spell of witchcraft on them, which is worse than illness, this madder plant with 7 knots can even get rid of that as well. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, when does this knotted madder plant necklace work? It's only if this necklace or these knots never saw the sun and the moon. It was not outdoors. And never saw, or was never exposed. It was never exposed to rain. It never heard, or it was never exposed to the noise of metal clanking against each other. Nor the coil time nor was it ever exposed to the sound of a rooster waking everyone up. Nor recall nigre, nor to the sound of footsteps. Then it works. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, oy bazoi, nafal puta bebida. You just threw the madder knots into the pit. You lost it. It was just like when a person physically, if something falls into a pit, they lost it. How can we ever use it? If it only functions, if it meets the above conditions, then you will never find a scenario where you're going to have a functional, therapeutical, curative madder plant necklace. Now, the Gemara has a bigger question. Aside of the fact that how can it even work? Furthermore, Mayira Banim, if this is what the Mishnah is referring to, only young boys need to be healed, Afilu Banas Nami, they also need it. And why young? Why not older? Why not adults? Mayira Ktanim, Afilu Yudaylam Nami. And therefore, that's not shot in the Mishnah. Elamai Kshadim. What are the knots that the Mishnah is referring to? Kiha, the Amar Ovin Bar Huna, in the name of Rav Chama Bar Guria. And now this is the beginning of a series of statements connected primarily to therapies, to healing, said by Ovin Bar Huna in the name of Rav Chaim Bar Guria, Bain, Sheyesh Legagoyim Alaviv, if you have a young son, Dafka son, a child, male, that has Gagoyim, he's homesick for his father. I don't know if the modern world today has medication for homesick. In the Gemara we have, there's a solution. The father takes off the shoelace from his right shoe, and he makes a knot. He ties it and he knots it bismoile on the son's left arm, and that's it. Does. And then the child is not homesick. And if he takes it off, he becomes homesick again. So that's what the Mishnah is saying, that a son is allowed to go out with this on Shabbos. Now, how does that address all of the, no, why not on adults? Because adults, we're going on the presumption that adults don't get homesick. They miss their parents, but not the way a little child does. Why not girls? So Rashi says, I'm reading inside the Rashi, Lo shaycha b'mekebus, it's not shaykh for young girls, because fathers don't love their daughters in the way that they love their sons. In other words, that young girls don't miss their fathers as much as young son miss their fathers. We're learning Torah. This is the emes, and then we have to just rearrange the way we think about everything around this. Also, it's time to say that Rashi had daughters, whether he had 3 daughters or 4 daughters, Gavaldik concepts. Now let's go weiter. Tefillin, because tefillin is put on our left hand, at least by most of us, and you use your right arm to put on the tefillin on the left arm. So you're using something from the father's right, put on the son's left, and listen to this. If you reverse it, God forbid, if you take the shoelace off the father's left shoe and you tie it on the son's right arm, Rashi says he's going to miss the father so much, it's going to add to being homesick, and the son will be in danger. Now we're just beginning. This is a good opening for the whole sugya. Again, we'll learn as much as we could today, and God willing, we'll pick it up tomorrow. Amar Oven Barhuna. This is the same Amoida. In the name of Al-Cham Bar Guria. Let's go, my friends. That here we're speaking about therapies that don't involve ingesting food or medicine, but they involve physical manipulation of the flesh. One of the things they would do is sachufe kasa atibura. They would turn a cup over the navel. So they would fill a cup up filled with hot liquid. They would pour the liquid out. Now the cup is very hot. They would put that cup over the navel, right? Bankis. So what happens when you put a cup that's very hot over part of the flesh, that part of the flesh goes into the cup. That's why if you ever did bankis, however you say this in English, you'll have nice red circles all over your body. So it makes...
It's called cupping.
Cupping, thank you, you're cupping. And what happens here is that if a person's intestines is deformed, it falls back into place. So since the navel goes in, so it moves the intestines and then it falls back into the way it should be. All of that zaktir b'shabbat is allowed to be done. That's a big chiddush. Shchika samamanim, that's the nakuda. Shchika samamanim is when you are taking medication or when you are anointing yourself with a substance. Here, you're doing neither. You're manipulating your body. That is not included in shchika samamanim, even though if one would not be in pain, there's an uvda dechal issue. But uvda dechal is something in which we can be a lot more lenient versus shchika samamanim. Let's go weiter. V'amar avin barhuna amar avchama barguria. Mutar lasuch shemen umelech b'Shabbos. One is allowed to rub, to smear on one's, we'll see, palms and soles, oil mixed with salt. Why did people do that? So here we go. What happens if a person is shikid, is drunk, and you want to get the effect off? You are inebriated and you want to wean off the effect. So even though Chazal tell us in other places,
it's inebriated,
and you want to get that effect off. So sometimes Chazal tell us there's only 2 options, either sleeping or walking, right? These are the 2 techniques. Here we're learning already a shtickle therapy. And where do we learn this therapy from? From many greats. Kiha de Rafuna mi Beirav. Rafuna was a Talmud of Rav. And as Rashi tells us, and don't get shocked, we're familiar with this, that a Rebbe sometimes would get his Talmud chicken. Now, why would he do it? Today we call this a Fabrengen. In other places, Rashi writes that sometimes when the Talmud is unable to grasp the depths of the Soid HaTorah, so the Rebbe will give him wine. And Talmidim got drunk. And so now, most Talmidim, okay, sleep it off, walk it off. But if a Rebbe had a Talmud that he particularly loved, then the Rebbe, the teacher, would help his student get better, wean himself off the shikrus. So like Rafuna, what happened to him when he learned under Rav. Like what happened to Rav when he learned under Rav Chia. Just like what happened to Rav Chia when he learned by Rebbe. That Kihaba Mibasme, when they would get drunk, Zaktirashi Shikurim, Shahoyu Mashkin Esal Talmidim. They would give the Talmidim wine, L'chaim, and now we want to wean them off. So this is what we did. So the teacher would bring mishchomil. He would take oil, olive oil, b'chal, the Gemara oil is olive oil and salt, and the shaifel, and the teacher would smear it, legavayasa diodayu, on the insides of the hands. We call that the palms, and the gavayasa to the insides of the karai of the feet, the soles of the feet, and this is already an incantation. And the teacher would say, the healer will say, just like this oil is thinning out, he's smearing it, it's thinning out. So too should the wine or the effects of wine of so-and-so. And when it comes to a refuah, that's the klal. We always mention the mother. When it comes after the passing, we mention the father. Comes to the refuah, we mention the mother. So you mention the person's name, that late sale, Chamre, the planya bar planisa, may the shikrus of so, ben so, the mother become thinned out, become impotent, become worn out. Now the Eloi, hold on, what happens if you don't have these ingredients throughout this amid? Whenever you read the Eloi means you don't have it. You don't have oil and salt. So there's another solution, which will also take away the effect of the alcohol. Maisu shiur the dana, bring a clay seal of a barrel, and soak it in water. Again, clay seal, clay soaked in water, it becomes rubbed out, it becomes thinned out. And he says the same statement. And you say that kehecha, the late seal, high shiur, just like this seal is thinning out in the water, is late seal, chamre, the planya bar planisa. Okay.
Rabbi, can this be done on Shabbos? This clay thing, or this is during the week?
No, this is during the week. You for sure during the week, correct? Yeah. Okay. The Omar, Oven Barhuna, Omar Abchamar Guria, based on what we said before, that you are allowed to do cuppings on Shabbos. Mutter lechanek b'Shabbos. You can strangle someone on Shabbos. No, we're not speaking about strangling. Strangling is what a chiropractor does, and you pay him for that. He strangles you. Like Rashi says that there's a bone on the top of the neck, that if you put it this way, you put it that way, you become well, you are allowed to do it. Again, it's bodily manipulation. If there is an issue, it's called uvdedachol. If a person is in tsar, then we are allowed to do something which otherwise would have to be awesome because of uvdedachol. When an infant is born, they would wrap up an infant very tightly in a garment. The reason why they would do it is to straighten out his bones. Like Rashi says, the bones of an infant are soft, and sometimes they get bent out of shape during birth. And if right after birth, they are tightly wrapped in a garment, it straightens out their bones. So we have with us a gynecologist. Here you have a good technique that you never learn about in school. Got to wrap them tight to straighten out their bones. You're allowed to do that. Vital, you're allowed to do that because you're physically manipulating the body. It's not included in the isur of shchika samamanim. Now, Rav Papa masna banim zakt Rashi. Rav Papa, we're quoting many statements from Oven Bar Huna in the name of Rav Bar Guria. Two statements were said in his name regarding banim, as we'll speak in a moment. However, Rav Zvid only had the Oven Bar Huna in the name of Bar Guria for one statement of a child. Explains the Gemara. Rav Papa masni banim. What did we learn? The case of Nats, our Mishnah was banim. And the next case was, the Nats was to alleviate homesick. That's the way we learned at the end. Then we have the sex wrapping a child. Both are Marhuna, the way we had it until now. However, Rabzvid Masna Bain, which means only the first one, only the Mishnah's interpretation, not a matter necklace. No, to take away homesick. That was learned in the name of this latter statement, as we had before, this whole technique of oil and salt. Of dissolving a whenever you are saying an incantation, you have to repeat it many times. Question is, how many times? So now you learn. My mother, right? My nurse told me, means every counting. Incantations are also called countings because and any time that there's some sort of therapy that is connected to it will have to be repeated. Then then repeat it the amount of times that you were told. But if you were not told how many times, so what's the number that's gonna work? What is the gematria of aim? Aleph Mem 41. 41 times. Oh, so guys, let's walk around doing incantations. You think 41 times. After 41 times, you won't be shiked anymore. You'll be maybe a bissel meshuga, but you won't be shiked. By then, it's going to wear off. Another sort of therapy. Even Tukuma means a stone that it preserves a pregnancy. There was a certain stone that a woman would wear that would, so to say, protect her from not having a miscarriage. What was that stone? A big discussion here. The Ran holds that the stone is a diamond. And it's called Even Tukuma because no matter what you knack on the diamond stands. The diamond itself is a preservative. It's strong. Other Rishonim say it's not stam a diamond. There's something that you have to do to the diamond. Be that as it may. The Braisa says a woman is allowed to walk out with Even Tukuma on Shabbos. In other words, it's a tachshit. What's your fear? Fear is that she's going to show it off. She's going to take it off to show it. She won't. She doesn't want to lose her child. These are like a kameya. Once it works, you can go out with it. That Even Tukuma. Not only does that work, woman wearing it to prevent her from losing her child, God forbid. But listen to this. Now we're getting already into the realm of metaphysics. If someone took this Even Tukuma, that works, and you put it on a weight, and you put another item, whatever that was, to counterweight the Even Tukuma. So the counterweight to the Even Tukuma is imbued with this koyach of the Even Tukuma. And therefore, she can also wear it on Shabbos. Not only that, this heter of a woman wearing the Even Tukuma, it's not only if she in the past already miscarried, so then she can wear it. Ella Shematapel, if she comes from a family that other family members, like we mentioned, if it happens 3 times in the family by 3 other people, then halacha says you got to be worried about it. She wants to make sure that she'll never miscarry. She also may wear it. And furthermore, it's not only, she may not only wear it when she knows she's pregnant, Ella, she doesn't know for sure, she can wear it the whole time because she says to herself, Shema Tasabin, maybe I'll get pregnant, maybe I am pregnant, and V'tapel. So to prevent all that, a woman may walk out on Shabbos with this Even Tukuma. Says the Gemara, Omar Rav Yemar Bar Shalemia, in Rem Abayit, that Vahu When do we say that she's allowed to go out even with the countermeasure of the Evan Tekuma? It's only the Ikavan, the Iskal, if it is exactly equivalent to the weight. The countermeasure that's a bissel more, a bissel less, won't function. Abaya asks Abaya, Mishkal, the Mishkal Mai. Okay, if the Koyach of the Evan Tekuma goes into the exact counterweight, so that works. What happens now if you put that in another scale and you put yet a third item, the counterweight, does the koyach of protection of a miscarriage go into that? That he doesn't know take. But Abaya says, my nursemaid mother told me. 3 lines under the Gemara. A person who gets fever every day you have fever. What should you do? You should take a white zuz. A white zuz are made out of silver. We just learned yesterday that regarding the golden fake tooth and the silver. Silver is called white. That's why they felt that wearing a silver fake tooth looks like your teeth. The teeth were not that white and the silver was matched. But it's called white means a brand new minted silver coin. You should take that. And Veleza lemilchata, go to the area where salt is coming into existence. And like Rashi explains, that they would go near the banks of salty waters. They would make a indentation in the ground, so when it's high tide, the waters of that gathering of water would go into these little crevices. And when the sun would shine on it, it would evaporate the water of it. And what would be in there? Salt. So go to salt right when it comes into being. And Veliskol by the measure, weighing, Veliskol maskale milcha, and you should take an amount of salt that weighs exactly as much as this white, brand new minted silver zuz. And Velitzaide bechalolo de veitzoid, and take this salt, exact amount of salt, and you should tie it.
Danielle, you're not muted, Danielle.
You should tie it on the neck opening of the shirt. The neck opening of the shirt. How should you tie it? Not with any chain. Dafke benira barka, with a strand of hair, and the fever will go away. Good. However, but if you don't have access to these ingredients, you don't have the coin, you don't have the salt, you don't have alanga here. So then another solution. And listen to this. You go on the road and you're waiting for an ant. That's A-N-T. You're waiting for an ant. When you see a camel ant, it means an ant that is carrying a load. Remember those ants? It's amazing, right? They can carry much more than their size. Oh, perfect. When you see a camel, a big ant, the dori midi that's taka carrying something, that's it. You're going to be healed. This is what you do. Lishkalei, take that ant. And put the ant in a copper tube. But you should seal it, with lead. Seal it so that it's stuck in there. And and seal it with 60 types of seals. Wow, you're gonna put wax, and you put pitch, and you put clay, and
with a Brazilian.
And you, it means to shake. Brazilian the Gemara, shake it, and velidre, and carry it. But the ant is still lebedik in there. And then you should have a conversation with an ant. And Belelli tell the ant, your burden is on me. He was carrying a leaf. Okay, we'll exchange burdens. Your burden is on me, and to unai Allah, and my burden, illness, is on you. It's good, right? That's it. So now the ant is going to get the fever. This is the origin of kaparis. No, don't do that. Because maybe poop the ant that you found yesterday, Chaim Yankel used that ant for his illness. So this ant is already carrying someone else's illness. So if you're telling the ant that your load is on me, you don't know what the load the ant is already carrying. It's like using the kaparas of someone else, right? So the dilma inish ashkeche, maybe prior to this, someone else found it, and the ifsik bay, and this ant stopped someone else's illness. But this ant stopped Chaim Yankel's illness because the ant is carrying it. Ella, a different lachash, a different incantation. And again, this incantation, Mustami, you got to say 41 times. My load and your load, it's all on you. And the Eloi, we're going to have one more piece. Eloi means if you don't find the ant, or you don't have the copper tube, the chulei, so then lishkol kuzah chadata, you should take a new small copper vessel. The laser learn how to go into a river, and v'lemalei and talk to the river. Say nahad in the river. Oisvin kuzah demaya, lend to me, borgmech, lend to me a little amount of water. Lo'urcha de'iklali, for the routine that's coming upon me. The routine means every day you get sick, every day you get fever. Okay, so now you fill it up with water, and circle it 7 times around your head, and then throw the water back into the river, but not straight. But when the Rebbe used to leave the Beis HaChaim, right? That's our minig. We take plants 3 times and we throw it over our shoulders, and and then we say Nahara, river, shkol ma'im di'haftali. Take the waters that you lent to me, the urcha de'iklali, right, and take the illness that came upon me, the yomi asa, right, it came upon me in its day, and now but yomi asa, and it's leaving also in its day, which is today. That's the end of all illnesses. Hashem should help us that all these learning of Torah should bring all of us to a real refuah shalema. Amen. To be continued.
Amen. Correct.
Where do you find this?
Rabbi.
Nowhere.
Rabbi, just a technical question. Rav is Tana Palig, but isn't he a bar plukta with Shmuel? So how is Shmuel able to argue with Rav?
It's like we Hasidim say that the Alter Rebbe is a Tana. So how can his contemporaries argue with him? They felt he's not such a big Tana. Because we are standing many generations later, we look back and we consider him on that level. Shmuel didn't consider Rav Tana Upalik. He never would have argued. Cannot argue with the Tana. Shmuel argued with Rav the whole time.
Was he the only one, or there were others?
So Rav Tana, I think it's Ilfa. Ilfa is Tana Upalik. There are a few. There's I think one more other than him. I mean, they all lived in the time of the Tanoim. They were all Talmidim of the Tanoim.
The first generation Amoraim. The first generation of Amoraim.
But not all first generation are like Rabbi Yehuda. We don't say on Rabbi Yehuda Tanu Palik. Right? No. It's interesting, and they lived at the same time. Again, unless listen, Rav, according to, I keep on quoting it. They say that Adaitis writes that Rav was Rab Abba, which means according to that, Rav was years earlier called Rab Abba, and Rab Abba is a Tana. Rab Abba wrote the Zohar.
Rabbi, even Rav Tanu Palig, we only come on to that when we have no other answer, no other Tana that you can find, you know?
Correct.
It's not